has to do with your brand perception, with your culture, with the way people look at you and how they think of you. And that has to do with getting people as advocates, as influencers, to share about your brand, to talk about it, to extend that influencer reach way beyond the quote unquote influencers you pay for or hire. They're more about the influencers that you influence by doing something special about your company, whether it's just a tiny touch point, making something easier, great customer service, a great product, and then those people become what I call advocate or shopper influencers for you.
Welcome to the Magnificent Marketing Podcast, where we interview the top marketing experts in the world and keep you up to date on all the changes and best practices to help you grow your business and stay on the cutting edge. Welcome to the show. Hello, everyone. I'm here today with Ted Rubin, and Ted is a leading social marketing strategist, keynote speaker, brand evangelist, and acting CMO of Brand Innovators and co-founder of the recently launched Prevailing Path. In March of 2009, he started using and evangelizing the term ROR, which is return on relationship, with the hashtag R on R. Many people in the social media world know Ted for his enthusiastic, energetic, and undeniably personal connection to people. Ted is the most followed CMO on Twitter, according to Social Media Marketing Magazine, one of the most interesting CMOs on Twitter, according to Say Media, number 13 on Forbes' top 50 social media power influencers, and number 2 on the lead tail list of top 25 people most mentioned by digital marketers. And today we are going to be talking about how to look for real-time influence opportunities and what to do. Ted, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, David. How are you doing?
Doing excellent. It's always fun to talk with Ted Rubin. So I'm looking for a spirited and educational and fun conversation today.
I was going to say,
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I was done. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and it's always fun and interesting to talk to you, David, because I always enjoy the time, and I was really thrilled to get to meet you face-to-face in Austin at South by this year.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you are a good time on the phone and in person and everywhere. So I'm glad I let you say that. So let's get going here. So first, quickly define what you mean by real-time influence.
Well, real-time influence, I don't really think there's necessarily a definition for it. It just means that it's really about the people and what they're doing day to day. In other words, everybody influences someone, and we all influence someone, and we all have spheres of influence, whether it just be our children, our spouses, our local friends, people at work. And influence doesn't necessarily mean I tell you to do something and you do it. It means that people listen to you. Sometimes it's by watching you. Sometimes influence is simply seeing the way you handle yourself in a situation, or the way that you walk into a room. Influence is the way I might walk into a room. And I just think that we've gotten into this whole thing that influence is about somebody moving the needle in a big way, whereas everyday influence is what happens to us in our lives, in every moment, in everything we do, and in every participation that we involve ourselves in.
Gotcha. So I think most people, understand real-time influence like the big Orioles Super Bowl deal where they took advantage of an opportunity. But are we talking about that at all, or are we talking about, other opportunities, or is it a mixture of both here today?
Personally, I don't think we're talking about that at all, at least in my eyes. I mean, Oreo wasn't really a moment of influence. It was just a viral moment of connection where they got an opportunity to have a little fun with something. I mean, and very often, companies just look at this too much. I mean, they're spending millions of dollars to cultivate influence by creating the next viral moment. But a viral moment isn't really influence. I mean, it isn't getting someone who didn't buy Oreos to buy Oreos. It was more about the brand giving themselves an image of having a little fun. And the other thing that people forget is that in order for Oreo to create that viral moment that people think of as organic, it was incredibly inorganic. I mean, they spent that moment probably cost them $4 million. between the amount of people they had to have assigned to it, between how often and how regularly those people had to be watching the brand on an everyday basis, and the fact that it was primarily outsourced to an agency. This was not like some of the Arby's moments where they empower their people to see what's happening in real time and react to it in a fun way without worrying about repercussions from management, in the immediate way. In other words, there's always repercussions. Okay, that was great. Let's keep doing those kind of things. Oh, that didn't work out so good. So even a company that handles it very well and doesn't cause a problem for the employee that did something, they're still going to look at it, review it, and say, we've tried this 4 or 5 times. It hasn't worked. Let's move off in a little bit of a different direction. But to me, the Oreo thing wasn't influence. It was just a fortunate advertising listening moment that got them a lot of play, and it ended up working out for them. They spent all this money and all these people's time paying attention for a moment to jump in, and they're able to do it. But the real moments of influence of those kind of things is when you empower your employees to be listening all the time and jump into micro moments, into when mom's shopping and wondering what she can do for dinner or how she can prepare something, and you give her an idea, and then that idea possibly spans into her writing a blog post or telling her friends about this wonderful idea of how to use Kraft macaroni and cheese or something like that.
Okay. Well, you mentioned Arby's. Let's talk about that a little bit. What do they do that fascinates you or that you like about them so much?
Well, Arby's, Dan Lynch is the president of one of the divisions and their CMO. And what he's done, and I believe he came over from Taco Bell and he was in a VP level position there. And don't quote me on that. He might have been an SVP. I'm not 100% sure. But he saw and was a part of a lot of the success of Taco Bell with the way they allow their employees to jump in on moments. And he's really created this culture at Arby's that allows his employees to have leeway to jump into things when and if they see the moment. So when Pharrell was wearing the hat at I believe it was the Oscars or the Emmys, or please don't quote me because I don't watch most of those shows, as a real fan, so I don't really remember exactly which one it was, but he wore it and they jumped in and said, hey, it was something to the nature of, hey, Pharrell, give us back our hat, because it was very, very similar, or it might even been the exact hat that they used in their logo. And again, an organization that everything has to be scripted, that you have to go through 5 levels of approval, that you need someone, an agency to approve it and bring back to the brand. This could never have happened in that moment. But unlike the Oreos exchange, at least to the best of my knowledge, this was not a scripted, let's have 50 people listening to the Super Bowl and wait for something we can jump in on. This was just their employees being empowered on an everyday basis to have a little fun with the brand. And a similar type of thing happened with Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart was a very kind of a critic and a negative guy about Arby's, and they jumped in and had fun with him. Now, because that situation went on a number of times, because Jon Stewart's always on the air and he's always talking, they were able to, brainstorm a little bit more and maybe script a little bit more of their side, but they still weren't sure how Jon Stewart would react because he was not a paid influencer or a paid advocate for the brand. But they had fun with it. They ran with it. They knew it was a wild card what he'd do, but they also know that he had an incredibly huge audience, and that almost no matter what he did, I mean, everybody knows Arby's about the beef and Arby's about the meat, so you can be a vegetarian and be critical of it, but it's not like they're hiding behind something or trying to imply there's something they're not. They've never once in their advertising that I know of, or at least is not a part of it, claimed to be healthy food or again, a place where people who don't want to eat meat can find an alternative. That's not what they're about. They're about the meat. So they were able to run with that. And, a lot of that has to do with with giving your employees leeway, with trusting them, and with also understanding something that I talk about a lot and a lot of companies don't understand, is that even when you make a mistake, it goes away so quickly in this day and age. I mean, the social platforms move at such a fast pace that even when you do something critically bad, I mean, very often in the very short term, it'll disappear. And if not in the very short term, certainly a few months later, nobody even remembers it happened or talked about it. So and especially if you embrace it. In other words, if you either say, hey, we did mean that, and, sorry if it bothered some people, or, oh my God, that was a mistake. Hey, we give our employees a lot of leeway. Sometimes mistakes happen. Sorry about that. Move on. Instead of the old, cover up or try to explain that or fire that employee and they weren't told to do that or they weren't allowed, instead embrace it and say, hey, we give our employees leeway to do things. Sometimes they make mistakes. And guess what? We're not going to fire them for that mistake because we're going to stand behind our employees, but we're going to use it as a training or a teaching moment. Now, I don't know if you saw the blog post I posted this morning, and I posted it on Facebook, I believe yesterday or the day before, but John Andrews, my business partner, who you've met and had some fun times with as well, and John's probably somebody else you should get on this show to talk to about this stuff. But John wrote a really great post on Facebook yesterday because him and his family, starting on Saturday, had a major traveling challenge. He was going with his wife and 11-year-old daughter to Hawaii from Raleigh, North Carolina. And from minute one, they experienced travel problems. First, their flight got canceled because of all the tornadoes and cancellations that Delta had throughout the southern area of the United States, or maybe it was the Midwestern area. And instead of getting angry, John just, look, flights get canceled. John and I travel all the time, and I love traveling with John because we deal with what we have to deal with. We never get angry at people at gates. We actually smile and support the employees, and what you'll find very quickly is how they'll smile back and support you. I wear my Be Good to People shirts, which I wear a lot, but I wear them always when I travel. I mean, if I'm traveling home and I don't have a clean one, I'll wear a dirty one going home because of the way it changes my trip, because people see that shirt and they immediately react differently. But getting back to this point of dealing with what's happening, John had a problem. His flight was canceled. He got on the phone. It looked like they might not even be able to get out for 2 days. But he just kept at it in a friendly way and kept asking Delta, is there anything they can do? They'll be very flexible. They ended up driving to Greensboro to catch a flight that was supposed to take them one place, and they ended up they couldn't get on it even after they got to Greensboro, so they got a plane somewhere else, and they ended up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning in Salt Lake City. And like John said, instead of getting angry, instead of letting it ruin their day, they made it into an adventure. And his 11-year-old daughter, it was a teaching moment for her. Like, things don't always go right. And then when Mary Catherine landed in Salt Lake City at a crazy hour, instead of being upset or complaining, she said, hey, I get to check off another state that I visited on my checkoff list. And, it took them, they finally got to Honolulu, I think late yesterday, after a very long trip. But it's what you make of it. It's in how you empower the people, whether it's in your family or in your organization, to deal with these things. And you might say, what does that have to do with influence? It has to do with your brand perception, with your culture, with the way people look at you and how they think of you. And that has to do with getting people as advocates, as influencers, to share about your brand, to talk about it, to extend that influencer reach way beyond the quote unquote influencers you pay for or hire. They're more about the influencers that you influence by doing something special about your company, whether it's just a tiny touch point, making something easier, great customer service, a great product, and then those people become what I call advocate or shopper influencers for you.
Gotcha. Now, I'm not sure. I mean, everything you're saying, I'm really picking up where you're coming from here. And I don't know how, our business might have struck your fancy, or you might know some intimate details. So I'm not sure how much you know about them, but if you do, and or if you don't, just give your opinion. But what sort of, especially for large organizations, you probably need some sort of guidelines. You don't want to do it so much where you mention all these levels of approval and all this stuff, but either speak to a company that has just some basic general guidelines, or if you don't know of any specifics, what's your opinion on what guidelines should you give? Especially if you have thousands of people in your company, it'd be good to give them some sort of direction. What can you speak to that?
Well, I'm not going to speak to what those should be or what they are for particular companies, but what I will say is that any company that doesn't have guidelines in place now, they're just way behind the eight ball. I mean, most companies have something. The problem right now is that most of those guidelines are way too constricting and usually try to cover every avenue and base. So my opinion is you must have guidelines. You must have things to tell your employees that, hey, don't say anything. I mean, it can be as simple as here are 10 basic things you can say without any kind of approval. For instance, how can I serve you? Or how can we help you? Or what can we do to fix your problem? Or thank you for letting us know. Letting people recognize they've been heard is probably the first and most important step about anything. But as far as jumping into conversations or leveraging moments, of course you have to have them. And they should be different for different levels of employees or different levels of training. And it might be one or the other. In other words, in one organization, it might be, okay, if you're VP level, you can do this. If you're director level, you can do this. If you're manager level, you can do this. Or in other organizations, it could be if you've been trained. If you've gone through certain training, then you can do this no matter what level you're at. You're a VP, you can't answer things unless you've taken the time to go through some kind of training. And I think every company needs to do some of that training. Some of it is as simple as, how do I use a platform? What's the proper way to use Twitter, to use Instagram, to reply on Facebook? All different platforms have different nuances. Some of it can be just as simple as keep it simple, ask people how you can help them, but don't try to fix something for them unless you get somebody who really knows how to fix it. So, I'll give you a great story, and a company that's been doing this for years. And I, truth be told, I'm not exactly sure where their guidelines stand now, but a company that jumped into this area very early was Adobe. And they've done a remarkable job of empowering employees within their organization to speak for the organization. And they made it kind of like a Tom Sawyer thing where, you get people to paint your fence. They made it that if you go through our training, we'll give you a special badge that says that you've been social media approved by Adobe. And they ended up getting a waiting list of employees that wanted to do this. Now, they got paid nothing extra. They have to pay attention, like not 24/7. I'm kind of exaggerating, but they had to pay attention a lot of the time to see what was happening, what people were saying. But this is a number of years ago, early on, when my daughter was younger. She called me up one day, and I'm a divorced dad, and a lot of people know that. I have a lot of challenges in that respect. I don't get a lot of time with my daughters. I don't get extra time. It's hard for me to speak to them. So I take any opportunity to possibly get on the phone. Because as we all know, if you call your kids on the phone, 9 out of 10 times you'll get back a text that says "what" with an exclamation point. And that's their way of telling you they're not going to talk to you on the phone. They want you to text them. But I got a text from my daughter asking if I could buy her Adobe Photoshop. Now, this is a moment that you can leverage a little bit, similar to a customer service situation in a company, because now she wants something, so I have her full attention. And I was able to say, hey, honey, that's an expensive thing. I need to talk to you about it. Let's get on the phone. So I got her to call me, and she explains to me that, she wants to be an artist. And by the way, she's now finishing up her third year at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, training to be a painter. And she said, I need Adobe Photoshop because I take photos for my art, and I need this program. And I'm like, well, honey, it's a lot of money. And she's like, well, this is what I want to do, and I want to end up going to art school. And I said, okay, that's a really good idea. I agree with you. Let's get you Adobe Photoshop. And then, of course, the divorced dad part came into it. She said, well, Mom says you're going to try to buy me a pirated version to save money because all you care about is saving money. I want the real version.
Another learning experience. I was like, another learning experience.
Yes. Another learning experience. So, being very used to these types of situations, I said, well, why don't you come over tonight and we'll buy it together. That way you can see we're on the Adobe, website. And she says, well, it's not your night. I said, yeah, but I'm buying you this Photoshop. I'm sure Mom will let you come for a little while because I'm buying this for you. And of course, she came over. And it was the end of the day after school, and it was approaching 6 o'clock. And I don't know if you or anybody in your audience probably has tried to download an Adobe product. I mean, Photoshop Photoshop is absolutely by far the best product on the market, but absolutely impossible to download. I mean, nothing but problems. And it's amazing to me that that's something they've really not resolved. But I guess the value of the product and how good it is overcomes that. So I'm trying to download it, and it won't download. I'm having problem after problem, and my daughter's getting frustrated, and I go to call customer, and the clock's ticking, and every 5 minutes she's getting a text from her mom saying, when are you coming home? It's not Dad's night. And my daughter's getting totally stressed out. And so I call customer service, but it's after 6 o'clock, and I get, one of these standard recordings that we've all heard before. I'm sorry, but, our customer service is blah, blah, blah. Please call back tomorrow. So what do I do? Like most people, especially now, I go to social media, and I don't go to complain. By the way, I did not tag Adobe. I wasn't even reaching out to Adobe. I was reaching out to friends of mine because I have a lot of friends who are technologically inclined who can help me. So I go onto Twitter and I say, hey, can anybody help? Trying to download Adobe Photoshop, having problems. My daughter's here, need to get it done, blah, blah, blah. And within 5 to 7 minutes, I got 10 responses from Adobe employees from around the globe in all different job functions. And again, remember, I didn't even tag them. They were keeping a watch on the word Adobe, and they jumped in. And to the last one, I got the same reply. And it just goes to show you how it's just not that hard to train people. Now, you might say, oh, my God, it's Adobe. They have all this money. But every one of them had the same response. How can we help you? Hi, I'm an Adobe employee. How can we help you? How hard is it to train any of your employees to pay attention to the name of your company, using keywords or something, and to say, how can I help you? It's just not that hard. And now, the more sophisticated side of this was they obviously had software that showed them that a number of people responded. And when I responded back very quickly, I was only communicating with one person who took it over. But the other good part of the training is no one tried to fix it for me. They didn't try to do something that they weren't trained for. What they said was, how can we set you up with someone who can fix this for you? What's your time schedule? How long is your daughter there? Now, my daughter had to go home at this point. So it got into a conversation about when will you have access to her computer again? We figured out that timing. They set up a call for me, and they fixed the problem. Now, any company can train their employees to do this. And any company can train their employees to say, let me get somebody who can help you with this. I mean, JetBlue is an amazing company. This also. Now, JetBlue has a system now, and it's evolved over the years. And my first experience with JetBlue and their social was back in 2009 when they were doing an incredible job. But now, back then they had, 5 employees doing it. Now they have a team of probably 40 plus. But they have a hotline for any question they can't answer in every department to somebody that has to get back to them within a few minutes to give them an answer, just so they can show people that they're trying to help them. Now, remember, JetBlue is not Adobe. Problems are a lot more difficult to solve. You're not finding somebody's bag overnight just because they complain. You're not getting them on a flight if a flight's been canceled or the flight's not taking off because of air traffic problems. But what they've learned to do is communicate with people, because what most people want is to be communicated with. So it's going back to this whole idea of, training people, but there's very simple ways to train people to answer with very basic things and then help them find the help they need. And going back to the whole Arby's and Oreo kind of concept, where you're also talking about them jumping in on things where they might be cute or they might have fun, there's a way of training people on how to do that, where to step over the bounds and not. And then more importantly, let's as an organization learn from our experience. When someone does make a mistake, instead of turning it into a crisis, turn it into a learning experience, the same way John did with his travel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm here, and it almost sounds like it's just coming down to basic logic, Hey, ask how you can help, and then do what you can to help, And
it comes down to basic logic, but so many companies are terrified because it's public. In other words, when they train someone in the store to say, how can I help you? They figure if there's a screw up, there's only 3 or 4 people watching. And then at worst, this person will leave and write about it. And then, back in the days before that, they didn't even have to worry. Maybe this person would go home and tell their neighbor or go to the PTA, and it was more traditional word of mouth. So they're so frightened today because it's happening publicly in real time, as you brought up in the earlier, the real-time influence concept. Remember, real-time influence can be a negative thing too. If something blows up in real time and people see it, they can be influenced to not want to deal with your brand. So a lot of it has to do with dropping the fear, empowering your employees, and then teaching them how to think on the fly.
No, I hear you. Yeah, and I think we mentioned his name last time in our podcast, but Jay Baer makes a great point to help with companies who are scared of having these social media fights out in the open. Is one big thing I took from his book that I read was respond twice. Hey, how can we help? And if somebody continues to complain, show everybody again you're trying to help, and then take it offline from there. But you've at least shown at that point, and this is for those real negative, people who sometimes just want to complain, just to complain, and they may or may not want their problem resolved, but they may want their problem resolved, is to address it outwardly 2 times and then take it offline. So that, that could be like a benchmark that companies who are scared to talk about it, but, to kind of combines with, they're being heard, you're trying to address it, and then people can see that you're trying to do that at least, right? So you can take it off. Now, I'm hearing a ton here about, basically meaningful engagement. And I've heard you talk about that specific phrase in the past. Touch on that, Ted. I know you've spoke a lot about this in the past. What advice do you have for basically the steps of a meaningful engagement?
Well, unfortunately, people have gotten the impression that meaningful engagement means that it has to be deep and specific and have lots of details. But meaningful engagement can be as simply as, again, recognizing someone has a problem. Like, I'm really sorry you've had an issue. We're doing everything we can to fix the situation. I mean, again, let's go back to the airline example. Airlines can very rarely truly fix your problem. I mean, even John's, where they did an amazing job of rerouting them in 20 directions, they couldn't just fix it. They couldn't just say, okay, we'll give you another plane, or we'll put you in the air. I mean, a lot of people could just get angry and say, I can't believe you canceled my damn flight, and this isn't going to work for me, and they could have ruined their whole thing and said, we're not going to go. But, John, sat with his family and said, so guys, do we want to cancel this trip, or do we want to just go on an adventure and see what happens? We might end up getting stuck in Salt Lake City. And by the way, all our clothes are for Hawaii, and it's 40 degrees in Salt Lake City. But, it's for a company, I just think that engagement needs to get down into the simple engagement things. For instance, so many companies have siloed their engagement. So Twitter has become the customer service social platform, whereas Instagram and Facebook, most often brands and even personal influencers ignore their followers. They just post stuff and they use it as a broadcasting medium, and very often it can be very effective that way. But it's amazing how you can make people feel just by even just thanking them for a comment, or liking their post, or just answering their question, or just being there. Like, we all know that all you want to know when you're standing at the gate of a flight is, hey, is there any chance that you're going to take off in the next hour? You want someone to just look at you and go, I really don't think it's going to happen, sir. We're doing the best we can. But if that person ignores you because there's so many people answering her, or they go, the worst one is, this one, they go and hide, right? They go down the jetway and they close the door. And they make like they're checking out something on the plane. They're not checking something out on the plane most often. They're hiding from conversation because they don't want to answer the same question over and over and over. But guess what? Just like in personal, when a new person keeps coming up to the gate, or someone who's in the back comes to the front, on digital, there's new people coming all the time. And if you engage with people, what you'll find is that the vast majority of people will stop asking you questions because they'll watch your answers to other people, and they'll do what I call participate vicariously. In other words, they'll say, hey, they're answering David, so they'd probably answer me if I asked a question, but I just got my answer because I heard what they said to David, so there's no need for me to jump in now. And that's another reason why I say don't always take it private. JetBlue has a saying. They say that if one person is complaining, the odds are there's another 150 people with the same complaint. So if we answer it publicly, we're helping resolve it for many, and we're actually scaling our own results at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it really sounds like you're getting people's brains in the mindset of, let's go back 20 years, or even like just let's go to today. And as you're dealing with your wife or your friends or anybody out there, you need just take how you would have those conversations. Yes. Talking to your wife, hey, yes, honey, I hear you. Let's work through this. Let's talk this out. And you want to bring that socially. It's like, stop thinking social is different than your human interactions. They're the same. They're just being viewed by more people. So just take it. Just communicate. Talk. As you would.
Exactly. It's where so many businesses fall short. It's easy to understand the concept that every consumer is a potential actual influencer. And using that reality to your advantage is often a different story. In other words, like the answer is sometimes deceptively simple. If you want to build influence, you need to be present. You absolutely positively cannot participate in a social conversation or any business if you don't bother to show up in the first place. You don't have to have the marketing budget of the Nabisco to seize an opportunity to influence, but you do need to spend less time campaigning and more time empowering your employees to listen and participate. If some of these companies would take some of their marketing budgets for the next ad or the next banner or the next piece of crap that nobody's paying attention to, okay, or you've already built that brand so well, and take that money and put it towards training employees, making them available, letting them know that during the course of the day they can participate and jump into these conversations. Look, this is just my opinion. Other people disagree. Some people do agree. But to me, it'll make their brand so much more human and so much more approachable, and people are much more apt to share about that than they are to share when the company just shows them another ad.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned listening, getting in the conversation a few times, and I'm sure some people are, adept to knowing how to join the conversations. But can you speak on how people can recognize when stuff pops up, any potential tools to use or whatnot, so that they can recognize when people are talking about them when they're not getting specifically tagged?
I am not a major tool guy, mainly because I'm not working at a Fortune 500 company or even a smaller company where I need that. I do all of this manually myself. I like to be very directly engaged, but there are hundreds of platforms. I mean, God, you were at South by. You go to CES, you walk into a room, there's 1,000 different people, but I mean, there's so many platforms out there, that you can buy. There are free ones. There are ones that are enterprise level that cost a lot of money. But most of even the enterprise level ones have smaller entry level plans. There were free apps available. I'm not really your guy to comment on one of those best. People that you can get better information from. You can simply go to Google and add that into the text around when you push it. But I use Google Alerts. I use @mentions. I mean, there's so many of these things. But because for myself, I'm so on top of all my social, I don't need an alert to tell me about it. But I use some of the alerts for when I'm not tagged, for when it's just Ted Rubin mentioned. And then the way I use that is again, because I'm not a company offering a product or service where alerts of people being upset are enabled, but I use it to serendipitously tag or like something that somebody wrote nice about me, or that somebody shared my content and didn't tag me, just said Ted Rubin, and I see it in an app mentions or on a Google Alerts, and then I go in and I put a comment on it. And most often, I mean, I talk to companies about doing this. I talk to allowing their employees to do this in their personal profiles, is when you serendipitously converse with people when they're not complaining, when they're not saying something. Just say, hey, thanks so much for coming into our store. Or we noticed that you were at Target and you had a great experience. Like, we'd love to hear about it. People love that. Consumers love being recognized. And by the way, they don't have to reply. So you're not putting any extra work on their parts. It's just if they want to jump in after you've made a comment, or go on, like I say to companies all the time when I'm on stage, one of my slides is a picture of a fly. And it's the proverbial fly on the wall. And I'll say to people, do you know what this is? It's the proverbial fly on the wall. I wish I could be in a fly on the wall in that meeting. And then I put up a slide of a picture of a living room. And I say, every consumer is inviting you into their living room, but you're not going. So few companies bother to go to the social pages of their followers, of their fans, of the people that write about them, and see what they're talking about. I mean, even when someone mentions them in a comment, all they do, if they're really aggressive, they might reply to that comment on Facebook. Most companies don't even bother. They decide that Twitter's the only place to do that, and you can comment all day long about brands, and they'll never bother paying attention to it. And that's such a wasted opportunity. But beyond that, if they mention you, why not click on their page and see what else they're talking about? Why not require all the employees, I would say in your whole company, but at least in your marketing department, that every one of them every day has to go to 10 pages of the people that follow you on social platforms. If I was a CMO again, especially the major at a brand, it would be a requirement that every one of my employees would have to go every day to 10 pages on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, and have some feedback onto what's going on those pages. What are those people talking about? Are they heavily talking about politics today? Are they more worried about what's happening in their personal lives? Are they writing about products? What product are they loving today? And I'm not talking about a competitor's product, but another industry's product. Why not talk about that? Why not bring up, hey, we heard that a lot of people following us, love Apple Pods, and they're using them with their iPhones, and they're loving them. We'd love to hear about it. And people go, oh my God, why do they want to hear about that? Maybe they actually care about what we talk about, what we do. There's so many ways to engage people, and there's so many ways to create content that's engaging. That I mean, for me, I have too much content. My stress level is I wake up every day and I have so many things that I haven't gotten to sharing because I haven't found the time for it. And I hear all the time that companies and people don't know how to create enough content. To me, it's so easy, except they're worried about it being strategic and it being exactly about their product and how does it move someone along the path to purchase funnel instead of how does it get someone to feel good about me as a brand.
No, I mean, it's really great having, gurus like you around that complement, some of the other, more technical aspects. Because I think with all the, the movement, and needing to rank high and, getting content written for different stages of the buying cycle. I do think all those things are important, but you do lose focus of the human aspect, and I think that's part of the reason why you're in your bio again, all these like super crazy, rankings of stuff is because you bring attention to that, and that is a lost art. I mean, how many people these days are writing thank you letters? Probably a smidgen of a fraction compared to 10, 15 years ago. And, how many people are communicating on a human level? Way less because things get rigid and everything. So it's really great for, to kind of step out of the technical details sometimes, take a step back and apply, the mindset that you're bringing to everybody. So it's really great. Now, what about, I'm sure you're going to love this, but, video for engaging, do you have, first of all, do you like that? And then do you happen to have any good or creative examples to share that you've seen, either from yourself or from other companies that have done that the right way?
Well, before we get into that, there's two things I want to say. First of all, you called me a guru, and it's really important that I address this because it's not just a thing where I don't like being called a guru, but what happens is when you call people experts or gurus, you put a company or a small business or someone else in a position to say, well, I'm not an expert or guru, or I don't have an expert or a guru. I am not an expert or a guru by any means. What I am is a guy that tries things and test things and I see what works. So I have a lot of opinions, but I don't just throw them out. I actually try them myself to see what works and what doesn't. And every company, every employee can do the same thing and gain the same experience I've gained. And that's all it is. It's experience. It's not expertise. That's really the way I feel. And then the second thing I just want to say before we get into the video question, and if I forget it while I'm talking, because I do that a lot, just remind me, is that another thing companies overlook is the incredible opportunity that customer service is to build advocates, influencers, and people that talk about your brand. Just please, I met mentioned this a little bit earlier about like when my daughter wanted Photoshop, and it was a perfect example of a customer service moment because she wanted something from me. When people go to customer service, they are looking for you to resolve a problem, which means they're listening to every word that comes out of your mouth. It is an incredible, like I like to say, when my daughter wants money, that's a customer service moment. She's putting out her hand and she's waiting for me to put money in it. So now I have this opportunity to talk to her, because she's going to listen to every word because she wants me to say yes to her request. So it's a great time for me to say, honey, don't drink and drive. Please, if you're ever at a party and you need to get home, call me, or just don't drink and you be the driver, or, to give her my moments. And she's listening because anytime in between there, I might say, okay, I'm giving you the money, and she's paying attention. And that's what happens in customer service. And so many companies look at customer service as a cost center instead of an incredible opportunity to build a relationship with your client. And then customer service comes in all forms. It's not just when someone calls you to complain. It's customer service at the moment when someone's in your store and they need something, and you, instead of pointing to the far end of a Walmart or a Target or a Publix, maybe like Whole Foods, every single employee will walk you over to exactly where you want to be. And when they can't find what you want, they're very apt to say, well, what brand is it? Maybe we can get it for you. That is a customer service moment. That I wasn't complaining, but they took it. So like John Andrews likes to tell a story that when him and I were in Mexico, we were at an all-inclusive resort at Hilton, and I recently modified my diet to vegan, and it wasn't a lot of food at one point for me to eat. So I wanted some French fries because I could eat the French fries, and they were all out. And the first answer I got was that they had closed the kitchen. And I didn't get upset. Oh, they're not making French fries anymore. Fine. And I moved on, and I just started doing what I could do. And what happened? 10 minutes later, a freshly made bowl of French fries turned up at my table because they had empowered the waiter or the person helping me at the table to not feel funny about going in the back and saying, hey, we have a customer, we have somebody here, and he doesn't eat a lot of the food we're serving right now, and I know we're not making French fries anymore, but can we? And he didn't come back and complain and ask me for extra money, just showed up and put it on the table. This is how you win.
Let's pay it forward. What was the name of that company?
Well, that was the all-inclusive Hilton Resort in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico.
All right.
So, and by the way, everything was not perfect there. It wasn't the highest star resort. We didn't get everything we wanted, but what I can tell you is that we got a great deal for our money, and the employees who make your brand. It goes beyond the products. It goes beyond the services you're offering. It's the employees that make the difference. And these employees made the difference. The guy who gave out the towels immediately introduced himself, started teaching me how to speak in Spanish, gave me a clue that if I show up with a Spanish line, even though I didn't speak Spanish, it would make him feel like I was listening to what he did. But and every day had a smile on his face, and he took his job like it was the most important job in the resort. These are the kind of things you can do. And now to jump to your question, which also can be wrapped around this, is video. So how does video? Well, first of all, you can create videos. More importantly, what I say is start aggregating videos and content created by the people that attend your resorts. And don't worry about, so many brands worry about it doesn't perfectly represent our resort, and it's not exactly what we wanted. And oh my God, the rooms don't look as beautiful as when we take a really professional video or photograph. But guess what? People know it's real. People see it coming from the people that do it. When I was at Elf Cosmetics back in 2009 and 2010, I created the first ever for a brand back in early 2009, or it might have been before the close of 2008, an aggregated content site that sucked in all these generated content being created about Elf. And I have to tell you, a lot of it was crap. Women would get their makeup, it would come in at the door, they'd have a shaking camera, they'd be opening the box, they'd start putting on the makeup. But we got more referral traffic exponentially from those videos that we shared than from any professionally created video we created. Why? Because
from Google Chrome.
Because our
calendar.google.com.
Because our customers knew that this was real, that this was someone making the content and sharing it. And when someone does that, especially like at a hotel or in your store, you share that. So that's the first step. The next thing is we have this amazing stuff now.
Wait, no, real quick, Ted, before we jump onto your next thought, I just want to go ahead and bring out the gist of what you were saying, and I couldn't agree more. We just started doing, getting clients to do video testimonials for one client, and they were asking me for parameters, and I said none. I mean, just talk about why you might like us. You can mention employee names, but no, I don't want you to have a certain backdrop. I want it to look non-produced, and to that point is don't worry about it. The more, less super duper, professionally shot, it is, the more real it's going to look. And again, that's what you're all about. So, and again, I just love, I'm not the only one. There's tons of people who love the way you say stuff, what you're saying, everything you're saying, and it's all about being real. So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the main point you're saying is, hey, don't worry about if it's not perfect. The less perfect it is, the more real it's going to look, which people will resonate with.
100%. And that actually leads into your other question, because there's also, the other thing I was just about to bring up is live video. Now, live video is this amazing opportunity, and it's real time, and it's happening, and you can repurpose it and reuse it when it's not real time. But a lot of companies are afraid of it because it's happening, it's not perfect, it's right on time. Even when a company creates a live video, again, it's live. You're not sure what people are going to say. It's not perfect. The venue that you picked for it might not be exactly what you wanted. It might be raining outside the day you planned for it, and you're doing something outdoors. But if you go with it, customers recognize that it's real. And to me, what I see is people really relating to that content. So this is another great opportunity for brands to jump into. So I think, you bringing up the video idea, as far as also, again, building influencers, building advocates, it makes it so people really feel connected to the brand. And they also say, okay, this brand isn't choreographed everything. This is really real. We walked into McDonald's. We were taking pictures. Some people are happy. Some people weren't happy during this video. But it showed us what was really going on at a store and the efforts being made by the employees to make it a great experience. So it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be real. Whereas when you choreograph a perfect family walking into the perfect McDonald's, getting everything made perfectly on time, everybody, look, it's a different age now. People know that, there was a time where that stuff worked. People were much more naive. They were not used to these situations. They didn't really realize all the choreographing that was going on. That doesn't exist now. And I just believe that by the way, there's still a place for that stuff. Don't get me wrong. And advertising works, and reach and frequency is important, and people can get a feel for your brand by the things you do. But if you add in this ability for people to interact and engage in real time, it just adds, it makes it human.
So break out those iPhones. Don't matter if they're moving a little bit, as you're shooting them, because that is just as good as, I say just as good. It's a great complement to, the higher production stuff that you're putting out there, with your.
And for some companies, it might be better, and it might be much more affordable, and it might give them much more way to work their budget. I mean, you can be so much more creative today. So look at it. I mean, look, what just happened. Let me remember. Okay, Adidas just pulled all traditional, like all banner ads, all traditional media advertising from a couple of their brands, and they were strictly using social platforms and social media and influencers and user-generated content, other things, because they recently built one or two of their newer brands strictly using those platforms, and it worked out remarkably. So, I mean, just Google that; you'll find out a lot of information about it. I don't know the exact specifics. John was involved and has been involved in the sneakerhead space, so he knows a little bit more about it. But also, I got to say that I think we have to wrap this up because I've got to get on to another call. So I just wanted to give you that opportunity to close this out in any way that you thought would be worthwhile.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was about to do the same. Yeah. Bottom line is, you've given us a lot of great stuff here today. How can people continue to follow you and learn from you?
Well, it's real easy. Look, I'm Ted Rubin, TED RUBIN, everywhere. So anywhere you go, tedrubin.com, Ted Rubin on Twitter, Ted Rubin on Instagram, Ted Rubin on Facebook, Ted Rubin author, I think it's called. No, Ted Rubin page is my author and business page. My business partner, John Andrews, are just launching a new company called Prevailing Path. So feel free to check out prevailingpath.com or if you forget all of this, just go to Google Ted Rubin, and the first 10 pages are basically me.
Gotcha. All right, Ted. Well, this was met my expectations. It was fun and informative, and I think you've added a new perspective for everybody to consider. All right.
I've enjoyed it. David, let me jump in one last thing because of what I just said about Google. Anybody can do that. That's not because I'm important. That's not because I'm an expert. That's not because any of those things. The reason I own so many pages in Google is because I create a lot of content every single day, and I engage and interact, and I post it in and syndicate it everywhere. And that's how anybody can do that. If you want to own those pages, you can own them. You don't need to pay or know any SEO tricks to do it.
Gotcha. All right, Mehdi, have yourself a good week, and until next time.
You got it, buddy. Looking forward.